With vessel length on blood pressure changes, the length of the vessel is directly proportional to its resistance. The longer the vessel, the greater the resistance and the lower the flow. As with blood volume, this makes intuitive sense since the increased surface area of the vessel will affect the blood flow. The highest blood pressure typically is defined as 120 millimeters at systolic, which is the pressure of your heartbeat when it contracts, over 80 mmHg diastolic, which is the pressure when your heart relaxes and is not contract. For your resting heart rate, the target is between around 60 and 100 beats per minute, which is where it's healthy. There is contrast in the blood pressure of vessels of different sizes because they all have different lumen sizes, which affects the blood pressure because there is a different force being exerted onto the walls when they're at different distances. For example, blood pressure in the capillaries is usually about 20 to 30 mmHg, being small, and the vessel is small in diameter, whereas the pressure in the large veins may become more negative. Seen in both graphs, there is a higher pressure for systolic, and the values increase as the exercise goes on. The central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. Nervous impulses will go from the senses where the change in environment is detected and where there is a need for a change in movement. The nerve impulse will travel from the senses through a sensory neuron to the central nervous system, in which it will travel through a relay neuron through the central nervous system. After the message has been picked up here, a response is put into place and is sent down the motor neuron and to the effectors, which will cause the triggering of the movement that was needed due to the change in environment which the senses picked up. The PNS stands for the peripheral nervous system, which is one of the two components that makes up the nervous system of bilateral animals, with the other parts being the central nervous system and the PNS consists of nerves and ganglia outside the brain and spinal cord, which can detect nervous impulses and can send and create a response. Sensory neurons are nerve cells within the nervous system responsible for conveying the external stimuli from the organism's environment, which is detected by the receptors, which may be the senses such as the eyes, seeing something that may need a response to, which for example for such as movement, or hearing something which is a detection which might need movement in order to revert away from into the internal electrical impulses. For example, some sensory neurons respond to a tactile stimuli and can activate motor neurons in order to achieve muscle contraction. Motor neurons pass on from the relay neurons and they travel to the effectors, which will cause a muscle contraction or whatever is needed to pick up the stimulus in the first place. It carries the message from the central nervous system to where a response is needed. A nerve impulse is the way nerve cells, which are neurons, they communicate to each other. Nerve impulses are mostly electrical signals along the dendrites to produce a nerve impulse or action potential. The action potential is the result of ions moving in and out of cells. A myelinated sheath is situated around the nerves. It's made up of protein and fatty substances. This myelinated sheath allows electrical impulses to transmit quickly and efficiently along nerve cells. If myelin is damaged, the impulse will slow down. An axon is a long, slender protection over the nerve cell, and it conducts electrical impulses away from the neuron's body, or soma, as it's sometimes known as. Axons are in effect the primary transmission lines of the nervous system, and they send a response around the body and messages. And as bundles, they make up nerves. Saltatory conduction is a factor which occurs in the neuromuscular response, which causes a faster impulse action, as it is the jumping of impulses over the myelinated sheath. This action is important in increasing the conduction velocity of action potentials. Myelin acts as electrical insulation. It also reduces the membrane capacity, and therefore it resists any friction on it, so therefore the impulse has a fast and saltatory movement as it jumps over them, increasing the kinetic energy. This is seen by the diagram on the top right of the PowerPoint. The wave of depolarization occurs in the four chambers of the heart. Both of the atria are where it happens first, and then both ventricles. The sinoatrial node on the wall of the right atrium initiates the depolarization in the right and left atria, which then causes contraction. This symbolizes the P wave on an electrocardiogram, and the P wave is shown here on the bottom left. The P wave, which is generated by the depolarization as it transmits the atria. Normally, the atrium depolarizes slightly earlier than the left atrium, since depolarization wave originates in the sinoatrial node in the high right atrium and then travels to and through the left atrium. An action potential is another factor in the neuromuscular control of movement. It occurs when a neuron sends information down an axon away from the cell body. The action potential is the impulse which is transmitted. The action potential is a large amount of electrical activity that is created by a depolarizing current. When a nerve is transmitted, it needs to pass over a large area and diffuse over gaps in the nerve called a synapse. The impulse will start due to the stimulus, which needs to respond to, for example, your ears or your eyes. They will detect a ball rolling towards you while playing football. From the receptors, an electrical chemical impulse is sent along sensory neurons to the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spine. Here the impulse travels through the central nervous system through relay neurons and finally sets off down the motor neuron, which has the job of delivering the impulse to the effectors. Along each neuron, the nerve impulses jump along structures called myelin sheath. This is the insulating layer known around the neuron, which adds speed of transmission. The jumping movement is known as saltatory conduction, and the gaps of the impulse are the nodes of Ranvier. Once the impulse is at this stage, each nerve ending connects to a muscle, which is the effector. This is seen in the diagram on the bottom here in the middle, where you can see the neuron connects to the muscle fibers. There is a rule called the all or none law, where all the muscle fibers have to be connected for the contraction to happen, or it just doesn't contract at all. At the crossover by the synapse, there are small sacs called vesicles, which contain a chemical store called ACH. It's a neuron transmitter. The vesicles split open when it becomes full and release the ACH, and if enough of the transmitters spread, there will be a contraction. ACH binds to the receptors on the motor end plate of the muscle fiber, and if there is enough secreted, the electrical charge is high enough, muscle action potential is created. The neuron stimulates sarcolemma by generating an action potential, which is an electrical impulse down the muscle fibers. Muscle units will vary in size because of the different muscle sizes they require. They require different amounts of energy depending on the motor unit size. For example, for muscles in the eye, the motor unit will be small, but for the quadriceps, a large system is required. They need to contract in order to kick a ball, for example. As the axon of a motor neuron approaches a muscle that it innervates, it divides into multiple branches, each of which makes a synapse called a neuromuscular junction. This happens with an individual muscle fiber. When an action potential reaches a neuromuscular junction, it causes ACH, which is acetylcholine, to be released into this synapse. Motor unit recruitment consists of fast oxidative glycolytic fibers, which are the immediate fibers, which are fast, twitch muscle fibers, which have been converted via endurance training, and these fibers are slightly larger in diameter and they have more mitochondria as well, as the greater blood supply and more endurance than typical fast twitch fibers. A motor unit is made up of a motor neuron and the skeletal muscles are supplied by the motor neuron's axon terminals. Groups of motor units often work together to coordinate the contractions of a single muscle. All of the muscle units within a muscle are considered a motor pool. A large motor unit will work with a large muscle, and the smaller muscles have smaller motor units. For the biceps, which are used sometimes for such as tennis. The biceps in the arms will have the same function of pushing the body forward and propelling it. These muscles will be connected to a larger motor unit, and this is because they have many muscular fibers in which the motor unit ends will connect to, and this is where the all or none rule plays a role. All the muscles need to be connected in order to cause a contraction due to electrical impulse, or it won't happen. Muscle spindles are stretch receptors which are found within the body of the muscle that detect the changes in length of the muscle, which vary. They transmit and send length information to the central nervous system via the nerve fibers. The muscle spindles contain both sensory and motor components, which are the Golgi tendon organ and the muscle spindles. These both contribute to the nervous system and function to influence movement. Muscle spindles are small sensory organs with an elongated shape. They are precipitators that consist of several modified muscle fibers which are enclosed in a sheath of connective tissue. These modified fibers are called they're enclosed in a sheath of connective tissue. They are called interfusal muscle fibers.